All right, now that I have everybody by themselves, you guys can go to saltynerd.com. If you like what you're hearing, you can go there and support all of our other podcasts. Give us a like and a subscribe. You can go to saltynerdclub.com. Shut up for a second. I'm doing a commercial. You can go to saltynerdclub.com for our Patreon. If you can support us, you can give us $1, give us some cheddar, give us some love, whatever. You can go saltynerdclub.com, go to our Patreon account. Also, we're on YouTube where we have daily content coming out. You guys can go to saltynerdvideo.com and like and subscribe. Help us build the channel. We're working on getting 50,000 subscribers. That's right. That's a huge goal, but it's a milestone that we can't wait to hit. 50,000 subscribers will help us on our way where we can do this podcast full time. We can give you guys content every day. We can talk about movies. We can talk about film. We can talk about TV shows, new things that come out. We can talk about news, whatever you guys want to hear. If you like our content, help us grow it. Thanks, guys. All right, everybody, let's talk about...
Whiskey.
Let's talk about whiskey.
Let's talk about whiskey.
I really wish...
You better get going because we're going to get derailed really quick.
We could get a local whiskey
Distillery
to sponsor this podcast because we would have so much fun with that.
Episode 9 brought to you by Jack Daniels, everybody.
The only way to watch episode 9.
Let's talk about the Rise of Skywalker.
Oh, yes.
J.J. Abrams gets called back to, in my opinion... I think Lucasfilm was like, hey, can you come back and please try and put this shit back together for us?
I'll bet he was just...
I don't think he wanted to do it.
I don't think Lucasfilm was like that. I think Disney was like that. I think Kathleen... I think Kathleen Kennedy was perfectly fine with how The Last Jedi played out.
You're looking at it as two different entities then?
Yes.
Okay.
I think Bob Iger went to JJ and he's like, look, I know you don't want to come back, but you need to come back.
Yeah.
And JJ didn't have a choice.
Here's a Scrooge McDuck building size of money for you.
What makes you think he didn't have a choice? Why wouldn't he just be like, no, you're on your own? Because he had a deal with Disney with Robot, right? With Bad Robot?
Not really. I think his deal was with Warner Brothers. And he also had a deal at Paramount. But I think that Bob Iger basically said, like, look, you don't want to piss me off.
Yeah.
Come back and help fix this mess.
I run 55% of the entertainment industry.
Yeah. And so JJ was basically in a no-win situation where he's like, well, I got to come back.
That makes sense.
And plus, I think he was also kind of a little bit pissed off about what Rian Johnson did. Because if you look at The Rise of Skywalker, it's very obvious that JJ had certain things in mind for what he wanted episode 2 or episode 8 to be.
Yeah.
Like, the whole... like getting rid of Kylo's mask. I think JJ always wanted Kylo Ren to have the mask. And then when he made the transition to Ben Solo for the redemption, take the mask off and show Adam Driver's face.
Yeah.
So like bringing back the mask, retconning the Holdo maneuver, all these things, like showing Rey getting trained, showing Leia and her training. Like he just had to do so much stuff to fix what Rian Johnson broke.
Yeah. So I'll start out by saying, because this is pretty much the only thing that I really have to say about this movie. I found this movie way more entertaining and way more in the vein of Star Wars than The Last Jedi. Well, when I watched it recently,
it's still dumb as shit.
It's terrible. It's a mess. It's frustrating and it's bad.
I feel like JJ went online, went to Reddit, went to Twitter, went to some other places, wrote down like 100 different things
that people wanted
put them
to
all
see.
in a paper bag, pulled out like 15 different things that he can put in the movie randomly, and just barfed them up on the movie.
Okay,
screen.
I disagree. I like your sentiment because it's funny, but I disagree with you. I honestly think that JJ had at least a outline of what he wanted to see. Hold on a second. So my takeaway from this movie, in my opinion, when I'm watching it, I see episodes 8 and 9 squeezed into one movie. And episode 8,
yes,
JJ's episode 8,
totally agree,
is essentially an Indiana Jones relic hunt for ancient Sith and original trilogy backstory stuff, where the characters from the new trilogy are going back in and searching the remnants of the movies that we fell in love with in the original trilogy, the old Death Star, all these other plot lines that have to do with like ancient Sith and Palpatine and this and that, and all these little hints as to what Snoke's really up to and blah, 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 blah. Like I felt like all of that was all episode 8 for JJ. The whole plot line with a spy within the First Order, like that, all of it. The first 45 to 1 hour of the Rise of Skywalker is what I feel like essentially is what JJ wanted to do with episode 8.
I totally agree. I said that as soon as I left the theater.
Yeah. And when I break it down and I try to write down like which plot lines are which and how everything kind of would make sense if you were to look at it from that third person perspective, I'm like, that actually sounds kind of fun. Like watching Finn, Rey, and Poe go on an adventure together to find out like who's the spy in the First Order and find out where's Rey's parentage came from, and this ancient, this Sith hunter that was working with Palpatine with this dagger that would tell you the direction to where to find this waypoint to find out who really Snoke is. Like all of that felt like, okay, if you put that in a movie along with Rey training on whatever planet it would be with Luke, like all of that put together, that's a solid middle episode. And the revelation that Rey is a Palpatine, that's that I am your father moment for this episode. Like it's all there.
Yeah.
If you break it down, it's all there. JJ had an idea for what he wanted to do. It got completely derailed. And he was like, all right, well, I'm going to have to squeeze all of this in the first hour.
Yeah, a lot of my friends that I talk to feel the exact same way.
Yeah.
They feel like they just tried to squeeze in what he wanted, and like they just tried to ignore or retcon The Last Jedi and put JJ's 8 and 9 together in one movie.
Yeah, Luke.
Which is why this movie, you guys were talking about Force Awakens being fast. This movie's neck break fast.
It'll
It's
break
just boom,
ridiculous.
boom, boom,
Me
boom.
and Kadish were in the theater together. We went to go see this movie together, and he was
Thanks
sitting right
for
next
that,
to me.
by the way.
You were busy. You were working.
We
or something.
invited you, dude. You couldn't come.
Could have waited till I wasn't working.
And we like
a lot to ask.
when Poe was doing the whole like fast tracking through light speed and
the
trying
hyperspace skipping?
hyperspace
That was
skipping.
a joke.
Oh God.
Kadish looks over at me. He's like, "What the is happening?" I'm like, "I don't know." That was one of the funniest moments I think I've ever. It was
Yeah,
so
talk
funny.
about something that doesn't make any sense.
hyperspace
skipping.
skipping. It's a new thing. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
But I mean, like,
But anyway,
it still takes time to travel through hyperspace, and they were like literally teleporting to like different planets.
yeah. I'm just going to get this out of the way, and I do agree with you with the hyperspace skipping thing. But like in my opinion, I think JJ, if he would have been given all 3 movies, I think there could have been a solid follow through with this trilogy and with these characters.
I sort of agree.
No, I completely agree.
But
That's all I'll say
That's
about
not
it.
what we got.
Yeah, it's not what we got.
Here's the real problem with this movie.
Hit me.
So first of all, JJ hired the completely wrong screenwriter
oh God, yes.
to work on this. Chris Terrio, the writer of Batman versus Superman
God, that movie sucks.
and Justice League.
God, that movie sucks even more.
Chris Terrio, he's an Oscar-winning screenwriter for having adapted Argo, which I guess you can win an award if you can steal from good source material. But left to his own devices,
Just talk to Benioff and Weiss.
yeah, left to his own devices, Chris Terrio has proven time and time again that he doesn't know how to write a story that isn't convoluted up the ass. Like, there were so many things going on with The Rise of Skywalker. And if you look at the production of this thing, they were rewriting the script on set. They had to go back and do extensive reshoots using the Mandalorian's green screen set technology.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was like 2 or 3 months before the movie came out. They were still doing this,
Yeah,
right?
but they were able to use the virtual set technology that the Mandalorian was using to actually quickly do like massive amounts of reshoots.
Yeah.
And it was all because they had no idea what story they were trying to do, what movie they were trying to make. And they literally assembled this thing out of a hodgepodge of stuff in the editing room. Like if you look at this movie, at all the plot holes that are in it, it's ridiculous. Like remember when I pointed out to you how when Kylo Ren crashes his TIE fighter in the desert and the Wayfinder's there and it explodes. And then later on when Rey steals his second ship from the Death Star and flies to Octu, and somehow the Wayfinder is there and in perfect condition.
Yeah.
And these things are not sturdy because Kylo Ren literally steps on one and breaks it.
And he crushes it with his hand.
Yeah, and yet it's able to survive an explosion at 100 miles an hour, and somehow magically teleport into the new TIE fighter.
Yeah.
Like there's just so much stuff like that in this movie.
You can tell it's like 5 different movies that they just spliced together.
Like when she's in the wreckage of the Death Star, and there are doors that still open automatically for her.
Oh my God. I didn't even think about that.
It was the Force.
The Force.
The Force did it.
Force MacGuffin.
The Force just opened up.
Why was there a hiss?
Anyway, no, I just like in that kind of circumstance, in the context of that scene, it was just kind of like doesn't make any sense. Never mind. Go ahead.
A lot of this movie didn't make. It's like, hey, we have to go to this other desert planet, and we have to find this long lost Sith relic hunter that nobody hasn't seen in forever. But yet his ship is just kind of sitting on top of this rock.
And it still works.
Like a couple miles outside of the festival grounds for all these weird squid people. Yeah. And it still runs. And of course, we're going to land in the sand right on top of the snake where the dagger is. So we're going to,
how do you have quicksand over a network of tunnels?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. But
it's amazing.
We kind of skipped my favorite part. I was curious about the movie experience because it sounded like all of us hated The Last Jedi. So why the hell did any of us go see it at the theater? The Rise of Skywalker.
Morbid curiosity.
Star Wars.
I'm a completionist.
Honestly, to tell you the truth, the reason why I wanted to go see Rise of Skywalker in theater is because I honestly wanted to see what JJ was going to do to address the problems that The Last Jedi brought up. I was curious. I was like, is he going to completely retcon? Is he going to try and feed off of that storyline that was left for him and go in that direction? It was just curiosity. I'm like, what is he going to do?
Did you go like opening night? Did you go early? Did you wait?
Was it opening night?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was opening night on Thursday. Me and him went.
Yeah.
I mean, first off,
how about you?
I'm just getting whiskey
blitzed. I love it.
First off, any movie that says Star Wars in the title should be an instant billion-dollar movie. It's just going to be, whether people
tell that to Solo
because that's another subject. But
you can blame me for that.
There's going to be people like us that are Star Wars fans, but not sequel fans. But we're going to go watch this movie, whether we want to or not. We're still going to go watch this movie, and there's just a built-in audience there, right? Yeah. And no, there's not.
I wasn't going to go, and I did not go opening night.
I didn't.
My son, my youngest son, who lives with me, just beat me down and because he wanted to see it so damn bad. So we went. I took him to see it, and the funny thing was when I left, I was like, "Thank God it wasn't as bad as The Last Jedi." The bar was so fucking low for me.
One of the things that me and Katie both said when we walked out of this movie was like it was way more entertaining.
Yeah, no, it's a rewatchable movie too. Yeah. Because just watching
I don't know about
you don't think so? No, I was watching it. Well, granted, I've only watched it twice. I've
only watched it
right
twice
before we started recording this.
I finished it today before we finished. Yeah,
and my thought at the end was like, I saw some new points I didn't see before. I picked up on some things I didn't pick up on before, and it felt like I was like, I could watch this again.
I feel like this movie is a lot like The Force Awakens in the sense that the more I see it, the worse it gets.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like there's so many things. Like for instance, one of my biggest issues with the sequel trilogy as a whole is the whole Maz Kanata. That's a story for another time. We never find out how she was able to come in possession of Anakin's lightsaber.
True. Do they do that in a comic
book?
They do?
But
do they?
But I think. In addition to that, there's this thing where, so the entire movie, Finn's trying to tell Rey something, and you get the sense that he's trying to profess his feelings for her.
That's what I thought.
And he never actually tells us what he was trying to tell her.
Yeah, and then they say in
they just completely drop it.
The fact that he was force sensitive.
Heavily implied that he's
also, like the whole thing about him being force sensitive, completely like where'd that come from? I know that JJ kind of set it up in The Force Awakens, but that was something that was completely absent from The Last Jedi.
Well, I don't know. Have they ever shown? Yeah, I'm sure I'm good shit for this. Have they ever shown anyone who's not a Jedi wielding a lightsaber successfully?
No, Finn was the first person.
To me.
Well, he
didn't yield it. He just cut a tauntaun. I'm talking about like Finn was using the thing.
Yeah, he was fighting with it. Against Kylo Ren.
Yeah, and like so to me, I was like,
he got his ass handed to him.
Sure did, but
that's character development.
Here's my point. So the whole force sensitivity with Finn thing just came off as a Deus Ex Machina because there's a moment towards the beginning of the third act where Finn magically just knows which Star Destroyer to target, and there's no way he could have known that, other than like, oh, let's just have the Force tell him.
Use the Force.
Yeah, and it was never really set up until that point. I mean, like there were little hints of it, but it was never explicitly stated that Finn had the Force on his side at that point.
Yeah. Again,
I like that word.
What?
Deus ex machina.
Deus ex machina. So
I'm sorry.
my argument.
I'm just...
My argument about that is that, like, in the context of the films that we've got in theaters, which I can't argue with, is what we were presented. There is no context for him being Force sensitive. However, if you were to look at it as J.J. Abrams' trilogy, he kind of sets up in The Force Awakens that Finn might be Force sensitive, and then if you look,
but normally that's something that you'd expand upon in the middle
and
movie.
then and they did arguably. If you look at the first half of Rise of Skywalker,
I'm talking about The Last Jedi.
Last Jedi, which totally, exactly.
Here's the thing, though, and it's the only thing I'm going to say positive about this movie. But in my head, okay, I can watch The Force Awakens, completely skip The Last Jedi, and watch whatever this one's called,
Rise of Skywalker,
and feel like it's a story.
Yeah.
I don't need The Last Jedi to watch these other two movies.
You totally don't. That's why I don't own. I own every Star Wars movie on Blu-ray except for The Last Jedi. I will not buy that movie.
I just feel like The Rise of Skywalker is the epitome of lazy storytelling.
Yeah,
I think
there are so many plot threads that are completely dropped or don't make any sense in this movie. Like, you know, Rey's standing on that cliffside where she figures out how to use the dagger to pinpoint where the Wayfinder is. It's like, if you put 2 seconds of thought into how that actually works, the fact that, okay, someone carved that knife at like that exact same place.
Goonies homage.
Yeah. Like you, and just by happenstance, she's standing in the exact place that you need to stand in order to like do that. I mean, it completely falls apart.
You didn't like that scene in Goonies either? They did the same thing in Goonies.
Goonies is
Goonies is a shit movie.
Whoa!
What? Don't get Alex started on Goonies.
I hate Goonies.
But Goonies has that sensibility of like it's a lot more whimsical, whereas this film
Chalk it up to lazy writing.
Get your shirts now.
This film just has so many plot issues with it that don't make any freaking sense.
I'll say this one thing in defense of this movie is that it was constantly trying to play catch up. And if you were to, if given the time in all three movies, in a trilogy, if the second movie was given the time to breathe and they established that they had to go to this particular spot and they were able to say like, hey, this knife only works if you're on this cliffside of Endor, here's the map, here's this, here's that. This movie is forced to gloss over a majority of the explanation as to how all this stuff works because it has to fit two movies in one.
That's what it's doing.
It also feels like everything was just thrown into the kitchen sink here. Like the whole Palpatine returning as the main villain, that just kind of came out of nowhere. And that was because they killed off Snoke in the second movie. So JJ had to figure out a way to bring back a big bad for the heroes to fight against.
I used to agree with you, and I used to agree with that idea that like JJ just pulled this out of a hat just to get people's butts in seats in the theater to bring Palpatine back. But when I was watching the Force Awakens and The Last Jedi together, there's a lot of like lines and mannerisms that Snoke has and Snoke's theme in The Last Jedi is straight up Palpatine's. It's the same musical theme.
Well, it's because he's a similar character.
He was a Palpatine.
I don't know.
I
think it's more than that.
No,
I honestly
there was no connection between The Last Jedi
Ian
and what JJ
McDiarmid
did.
literally said in an interview that they didn't ask him to come back until like a month before they started shooting Rise of Skywalker.
I mean, there's YouTube videos where people are like, Snoke is Palpatine. Here's why.
Did you just listen to what you just said? Ooh, there's a YouTube video.
All right, fine. I'll give it to
Check
you. I'll give
and
it to
mate,
you.
sir.
All right, fine.
Thank you.
Fine.
Boom.
I'll shut up now.
Knuckles across the table.
All I know
I'm
is
gonna
this,
make
when
a YouTube
I
video.
left the theater from this movie, which was the only time I'd watched it until you guys asked me to come on this podcast today, so I rewatched it. I felt infinitely better than I did when I left the theater having watched The Last Jedi. But I like some of the stuff that they did. Even though overall it is a bad movie and I don't like it, and I kind of wish that the sequel trilogy just didn't exist. I like the idea at the end of where Rey is kind of channeling all of the Jedi. I do really like that idea. But the gnarly powers that the Emperor has at the end of that movie, are we going to talk about that?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, but there are a few things I want to cover before we get to that.
Go ahead.
So first of all, okay, so there's that scene where Rey just farts out the Force lightning, destroys the ship.
Oh, and then she thinks she kills Chewie?
Yeah. So
That's another thing. Episode 8, Chewie dies, right?
So
And we're all like, oh my God. And then episode 9, it's revealed that he's still alive.
so here's the thing.
It's
So
the Han Solo thing all over again.
when they get on Kylo's Star Destroyer, she can sense that Chewie's there.
Yeah.
Why couldn't she sense Chewie was still alive after she blew up that transport?
She was in shock. She was confused. She was in shock. She couldn't think straight. She had assumed that she had just killed him. When she was at peace, when she was calm, when she got back on the Star Destroyer and she had a mission, she was like, oh, wait a second. I sense a presence that I've not felt since.
Damn.
You know,
I'm never going to be
just
able to
caught
watch
up
that
to me what you
scene
were talking
again.
about.
another issue is that so when she uses the Jedi mind trick on the two stormtroopers that corner them, and
It's okay that we're here.
yeah. So the way the Jedi mind tricks works, maybe you guys can fill me in on this. It's that it's almost like an influence nudge. Like if it goes against someone's like code or internal logic, they won't fall for it. So the idea that she can just like disarm every stormtrooper by just Jedi mind trick, like why didn't she do that on Burning Man scene where like, you know, Lando shoots that guy with a crossbow? Couldn't she have just said like, we're not who you think we are? And the guy's like, you're not who I think you are. And then he walks away. Like couldn't she do that with every stormtrooper they ever ran into? Just say like, you want to drop your weapons.
Because, Matt, they have to have scenes where they're chasing each other on sand snowmobiles.
But
honestly-
it's just obvious that JJ doesn't know, like he uses the Force to just fill in plot holes.
That's
Right?
not how
like
the
he
Force
he doesn't
works.
actually know how it
love
works.
that line.
That's true.
I have to say, though, that like that scene that you're describing right now where the stormtroopers in the middle of this party is just one lone stormtrooper that out of nowhere, like they make a comment about it like, oh, be careful, there's first order troopers all over this place, which kind of sets up the reason why he's there. But when he shows up, he's all by himself. He shows up, that you could cut that whole thing out and it would not change anything. There's no reason for them to be there. They could have found them after they talked to Lando and then like, oh my God, the First Order's here. We got to get out of here.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
But it is funny how like Kylo Ren gets the Mardi Gras beads analyzed and they're like, sir, these are from this planet at this particular location.
That's a super plot convenience.
And instead of taking the entire Death Star there, he's like, I'm going to get in my ship. I'm going to go there, on my own. And the idea that does hyperspace just instantly transport you anywhere you want to go now?
I always, I was wondering about that actually too last week when I was rewatching this movie. Because, it used to be a time when, you had to charter a flight to go from, Mos Eisley to Alderaan. That took a little while, right?
Yeah.
And it's not zip zap and you're there for sure.
Yeah, but with hyperspace skipping, it just teleports you anywhere you want to go.
Like, how long did it take the Rebellion to get to Endor when they were in whatever Never Land Rebellion area? And they were like, all right, guys, let's form up and let's go to Endor. Like, it was pretty quick.
Why do they have to fly through the
space cancer?
Weird space cancer.
Because it looks cool.
Just fly around
so
it.
the only thing that when I was watching this movie, that the only thing that they said that separated Exegol from the rest of the universe is they said it's in the unknown regions. So it's just like the Kessel Run. Why can't people just fly through the Kessel Run?
So is God there like in Star Trek 5?
Giant space squids out there.
Q is God in Star Trek.
I also like how on Exegol, the ships don't know which way is up. And that's why they're stuck in the atmosphere until the beacon can guide them out.
Except for when they go to that one planet. They were
Zori Bliss's planet.
Yeah, Zori Bliss's planet. When they destroy that one planet, Poe is like, they sent one Star Destroyer to go to destroy this planet to send a message to the rest of us. So like that one was good. He was cool. He's like, I know where to go. But when the whole fleet of
I know which way is up.
when like thousands of Star Destroyers were like, how do we get out of here? And they're like, we don't know.
Yeah, and why would Palpatine announce his presence before his master plan is executed?
Because he's got an ego.
The dead speak.
The dead speak.
In the opening crawl.
But the idea that, okay, these ships don't know which way is up is one of the laziest freaking plot devices.
You know who
What's that
knows
t-shirt,
which way
ladies
is
and
up?
gentlemen?
Space horses know which way is up.
Rose Tico knows which way is up.
Okay, so before, we're basically just talking about memes at this point.
We totally are. Whiskey.
Whiskey is the fault of this. So, like, my point stands. Like, honestly, I feel like if JJ was given the entire trilogy, we could have had 3 solid, maybe not perfect. I will give you, like, not the greatest writer,
We'd have
especially
had 3 passable
Star Wars movies. If the Last Jedi, if the Last Jedi was taken out,
but
and
you know what
split the Rise of Skywalker.
You know what I can say about all 3 of these movies is, like, if you turn off your critical factors, if you completely shut down your brain, and you just stop caring about Star Wars in general, they're entertaining enough movies. Like they're enjoyable enough. I could even watch The Last Jedi and be like, yeah, it was a good enough movie if I stopped caring about the franchise.
I can't say that about that movie.
I could say I would agree with the first and the last, but not The Last Jedi. I just can't.
Danny.
Yeah. I felt like The Last Jedi by itself was just boring.
The Last Jedi is an affront to
some
a Star
people,
Wars fan.
Well, okay, so
I know a lot of people that love that movie.
Well, then they're wrong.
To play-
I'm sorry, but they're
I agree
wrong.
with you, man. Trust me.
to play devil's advocate, there are some people that I know personally who think that The Empire Strikes Back is boring.
They're stupid.
Yeah, they're dumb.
So saying
How old are these children?
You should
This is
stop
a
knowing
millennial
these
thing.
people.
Hey, speaking of which, today we need to all recognize today's the 40th anniversary.
It is.
As we are sitting here talking
about these bullshit
about these
sequel
this
trilogies.
is the 40th anniversary of
40th
Empire.
anniversary of The Empire Strikes Back. Shout out to
the best
the
movie.
best Star Wars movie ever made.
And,
You can go to our YouTube channel at saltynerdvideo.com and check out our analysis of Empire Strikes Back.
But speaking of the worst Star Wars movie ever made,
Shameless plug.
I'll say this: like, as a film enthusiast, as someone who studies film and studies storytelling, The Last Jedi to me is such a fascinating movie, not only for what it does wrong, but for what it tries to do right. Because as bad of a writer and storyteller as I feel Rian Johnson is, he does make a lot of interesting choices in the movie itself. And if you look at it not as a Star Wars movie, but almost as an Akira Kurosawa sci-fi film, like, there are lots of different layers to The Last Jedi where I can appreciate it on a technical level, but as a Star Wars fan, it just breaks my heart to watch it.
No, absolutely. Like, The Last Jedi, like you were saying, the fallen hero, the Kurosawa, like, this is not a new type of story. If you watch The Last Jedi completely separated from the Star Wars franchise, it's a good movie, right? The fallen hero.
I wouldn't call it good, but I'd call it interesting.
Okay, I'm talking about, like, Luke's theme, like Luke's
Again,
redemption.
not good. Not well done.
I mean, the Count of White thing is bullcrap, but
Even
like the running out of gas thing is classic Battlestar Galactica. Like, everybody says that. Oh, that's an episode out of Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, but that's not Star Wars.
Exactly. That's
not.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, separated from the Star Wars franchise, this movie's like, okay, yeah, it's cool. It's a cool sci-fi movie.
But
a lot of interesting visuals.
You can see the themes that Rian Johnson tried to go for. You can see the emotion that he tried to layer in there. You could see the character moments that he tried to, bring to the forefront. And, if it had been anything other than a Star Wars movie, I think I would have liked the movie much better. Like, if he had had his own, chance to tell a story with characters that were completely new, that, like, he wasn't beholden to anything that came before him, I feel like it might have been a more interesting, better movie. But because it was the middle part of this trilogy, and because it handled these legacy characters with such disrespect, and because it was also the first Star Wars movie that really kind of put in some woke messaging in it.
Anti-capitalism stuff.
Anti-capitalism, but also anti-male, like feminism, stuff like that. Not that these things are necessarily bad, but I don't feel like they belong in a Star Wars movie. It felt like they were trying to make it too political.
How do you feel about the argument that people make about, because we all know, I think we're all pretty well established that George Lucas leans more left than he does conservative, right?
Sure.
Like, with Leia being the strong female character.
He's a hippie, man.
So does
He's
Mark
a
Hamill.
hippie.
Yeah.
Exactly. He's a hippie.
Mark
so,
Hamill's a huge lefty.
Exactly. Mark Hamill also. So, like, when you see these themes, and it's argued all over social media that Star Wars has always been a political leaned franchise where he's basically fighting space Nazis, and you have a strong female character and you have these other two male characters.
The issue is that once you get into propagandizing big franchises, they become exclusive instead of inclusive, which means that they're excluding a large portion of the fan base that used to love them. And if you want to make mainstream entertainment for the masses, it has to be inclusive. It has to, take these very simple themes like the original trilogy. It was basically a very simple morality tale.
Right.
And it wasn't something that was kind of preaching politics to people. But once you start injecting that stuff in there and making them a piece of propaganda as opposed to a piece of entertainment, you start alienating people, and that's not a good thing to do for the longevity and health of a franchise.
I agree with you 100%. What I'm trying to say is that like the original trilogy, you had moments in those movies that like we don't accept their droids here. We don't want their kind here. Like people say that, that's an allegory for racism.
That's part of world building though. Like we now know why people had such
that's like 30,
bad look at
30
droids.
Years later though. I can't account that.
Still, but
was George Lucas thinking at that moment that 30 years from now I'm going to have a backstory about droids killing people?
Maybe not, but it's the same thing as just saying my father fought in Clone Wars. It's just a part of this tapestry of this universe that you're establishing. That people are racist against droids. It's an interesting kind of aspect to the Star Wars universe.
People were racist then; they're racist now.
Yeah.
They were racist.
I mean,
before
it's
that.
okay.
So that's the thing about themes, right?
It's
like,
okay to use allegory in order to explore deeper themes, but to specifically put in there the stuff that Rian Johnson did. It's very divisive, and it's something that Kathleen Kennedy has continued to do throughout all the new Star Wars movies, and it always serves to divide the fan base even further. Whereas with the original trilogy, there were politics involved, but the politics were plot points within the story itself, like the whole Galactic Senate thing.
And it was also, in my opinion, it was all politics that was already pretty much universally established. Hey, Nazis are bad.
Nazis
but
bad.
real Nazis are bad,
But
right?
racism
is bad.
it wasn't
right?
even-
Like, these are universally accepted themes.
It wasn't even Nazism; it was totalitarianism. It was
I mean, they were dressed in in military green with the big hip pants. Like they were Nazis.
Oh yeah,
right?
I mean,
Nobody will
even
ever
looking at the
deny that.
First Order, it's very, evokes the memory of.
Think about Hux at that
Nazi
scene where
Germany.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
when
it's
he's Hitler.
He's pure Hitler.
Yeah.
Today is the day the First Order will blah blah blah.
Yeah, exactly.
and I mean,
it's-
there's nothing wrong with that because Nazis are universal villains. You know?
And I think Steven Spielberg said it when he was making the Indiana Jones movies.
but
Like the
because-
best villain you can have is a Nazi.
Because
nobody
politics
cares.
exists in a movie does not mean the movie's political. It's not until you start using movies to push a specific political point of view that it becomes political.
You're talking
It
about the
becomes propaganda.
anti-capitalism in The Last Jedi?
Yeah. Now, I thought that it was an interesting kind of element that there's this war economy within Star Wars that keeps things going. But the whole classism where, Rose Tico on Canto Bight starts talking about how evil rich people are and how abusive they are. And
Well, they were war
and how
profiteers.
how greedy capitalism actually is and stuff like that. I mean, it wasn't just the war profiteers. The whole purpose of Canto Bight, the subplot in The Last Jedi, is to push this message that capitalism's bad and rich people are evil. It was the whole 1% thing personified in the Star Wars universe. And there's nothing inherently wrong with these types of messages, but they just don't belong in Star Wars because they start getting really preachy, and they start vilifying certain people who believe certain things that you don't need to vilify.
Yeah. I'm trying to think through the original trilogy, although we're fighting space Nazis, there was no classism in any of those three movies. There's not even a hint at that world. Same thing with the prequels. The prequels was
Well, one of
We
the
had slaves,
slavery was bad, which is universally accepted.
Yeah.
So
one of the interesting things about, if you look at the original Star Wars and you look at The Hidden Fortress, which was the film that George Lucas based it on, the Hidden Fortress, the princess in that movie has to pretend to be a peasant as she's going through enemy territory. And for the first time in her sheltered life, she actually sees how peasants actually live. Mm-hmm. And she begins to realize just how privileged she's been and how hard it is to live as a peasant in this feudal society that's in the middle of the Civil War. And when you have elements like that, where it's okay, now I understand why classism is bad, and you get the sympathy of the lower classes and things of that nature, that can be a teaching moment, that can be a lesson. But when you take that and reverse it and say oh, rich people are bad, people who are educated and white or whatever are bad, a lot of people out there get insulted by that because they're oh, they're talking about me. And all of a sudden, this wonderful franchise, which for 40 years has welcomed everyone with open arms to come and enjoy it and escape into this universe, is suddenly saying, oh, this is not for you anymore. And that's not good. It's not a good thing to do.
It's an interesting take.
So, am I the only one that's noticed we just keep coming back to The Last Jedi?
I was going to say
No,
that. Okay,
we
so
do.
let's bring it back real quick. Last question about The Rise of Skywalker and about specifically about Rey, because these three movies are about Rey, and I want to
You mean
talk
the
about
identity thief?
I want to talk about her. Real
I
quick.
think the funniest meme I saw was the LifeLock meme, where identity theft can happen to anyone. It's just Rey's picture.
That's great.
I just want to talk about her real quick because she's the main character, and then we'll be done with this podcast. But my question presented to you is: Rey a Mary Sue?
Yes.
100%.
I've written an extensive article about this, which
Danny,
proves it.
You haven't talked in a minute. Kate just talked fucking for like 2 hours. So go ahead. Is Rey a Mary Sue, or is it just our interpretation because we don't like the way this franchise went?
Well, if the whole download thing is a thing, then
Officially, it is.
I guess no, but it would have been nice to have her, see her trained a little bit more.
She trained for a year between The Last Jedi and hold on a second. Between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, she trained for a year with Leia.
No. Well, yeah, but I just mean in like the very first movie. I think there should have been
the first one.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean,
Well, okay,
before
so
she even got to The Last Jedi. I mean, or much less The Rise of Skywalker. Like she's just so. But you guys kind of explain it with the whole the mind rape, the download thing. So if that's what they're saying, whatever, I'll buy it.
Really?
Yeah, sure. I'll see
Wow, you
what they're
gave up
rolling out.
really easily.
Yeah, I mean, it's also. I don't. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
You got to go?
A while ago now, but it's all good. Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like the Rise of Skywalker specifically kind of did its best it could have done to address the fact that she spent a year training. She had the Jedi text. She was with Leia. She was, and
Too little,
Poe-
too late.
Yes, again, too little, too late. But Poe addressed the fact that it's like, hey, I've been in this war for like a year, and you've been here.
Yeah.
So it kind of addresses the fact that, like, okay, she was overpowered. I cannot in any way defend the whole lifting rocks thing in The Last Jedi. That was just outrageously ridiculous. But as far as The Rise of Skywalker goes, I feel like she had JJ at least attempted to make Rey do her due diligence to become the Jedi that she became.
I mean, it was retroactive, though. Like,
Yeah.
that,
It was
that stuff that should have been set up at either the end of the first movie or in the middle
in
movie.
this in middle
Yeah.
of the second one, which again, like I'm saying, JJ's Rise of Skywalker, the first half of that movie is episode 8.
I've said it before, I'll say it again. I completely agree with that, and it's just a shame that it didn't work out that way. But that's not what they were working with. Or they could have pulled a Harry Potter and made a part 1 and part 2, and just let them just.
Yeah.
That's
Do
what
it
I wish
that
they would
way.
have done, yeah.
A lot
But
of
like
people
this
wish that.
really should have been 2 movies. It should have been episodes 9 and 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it feels like episodes 7 and 8 are just, one movie divided into 2.
Yeah.
Because it picks up right where
5
episode
minutes
7
later.
leaves
Yeah,
off.
it's so weird. Like that's the first time. So I noticed a couple changes. So in The Last Jedi picks up pretty much right at the end.
10 minutes later.
Yeah, and that they've never done that before. And then in Rise of Skywalker, it's the first time they go straight to a montage. It goes from the crawl to like Kylo Ren killing people. When in every other movie, it's always like the crawl and
slow
then
build.
like some kind of spaceship just comes out of war, or there's like some ships flying by a planet, or it's always like an exterior space shot. Except for this is the first movie that didn't do that.
Yeah.
That's the
Rise
kind
of
of stuff
Skywalker.
that makes it not feel like a Star Wars
Yeah,
movie. So
It doesn't fit the mold.
it's like we need a 3-year skip between each film.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like there's so many things that are just problematic with this, like the forced teleportation, being able to like actually have objects move from place to place through the
Yeah,
force.
that's weird.
I like last week I would have 100% agreed with you, but because I just recently rewatched it and there's a lot of emphasis on this forced dyad situation that they have with Rey and Kylo, where it feels like it's exclusively a power that only they share.
That's literally something they invented for the 3rd movie, though. That was never set up beforehand.
You don't think it was at all set up in The Force Awakens?
Nope.
I think it may have been an idea that he was kind of brewing?
It might have been, but it's never established really.
Because in the
Like
Force Awakens,
a lot of this is stuff that you would have to assume if you were watching The Force Awakens without the context of the Rise of Skywalker.
again, you could be right, but from a different point of view, you salty bastard.
He is right, damn it.
From a different point of view, in The Last Jedi,
From the wrong point of view.
they mention that like what Snoke says it like 3 different times, and Luke says it again. Light, powerful dark. The light rises and the darkness to join it. Like they say it over and over again. They're like beating it into our heads that there is something special about the dynamic between Kylo and Rey. And that's what sets them apart from any other Jedi or any other character that we've seen before. And that's what gives them these unique and once of a lifetime powers of these like weird Force Skyping and this teleportation stuff. Like that's all unique to these characters because they are this quote unquote Force dyad.
Isn't that convenient?
Isn't it convenient
yes,
that
very
somebody
convenient.
Well, then
wrote
how do you
that?
explain? I mean, like, I guess no, he doesn't. In The Last Jedi, do they actually make any kind of physical contact, Luke and
Yes.
Kylo Ren? Do they?
Luke and Kylo Ren?
Not Luke. No.
No, they don't. Okay.
Well,
Rey
Kylo
and
Ren
Kylo.
puts his lightsaber through him.
Rey and Kylo Ren, there's some tangible
So there was,
matter.
but in The Last Jedi, or
Yes.
there was.
So Rey is standing
Okay.
in the rain, and they have their force Skyping. God damn it! They have their Force Skyping moment where they're talking to each other, and it's raining where Rey is, and Kylo's on a Star Destroyer. And at the end, when the Force Skyping stops, his hand is wet.
Okay.
Is that when
Okay.
he's shirtless?
So they did.
No, not that moment.
So they did.
his
They did.
massive
They did
chest.
establish it then.
They
So,
did establish
Yeah, they
it,
did
yeah.
establish it.
The whole thing about Palpatine secretly controlling Snoke, though, like none of that really makes a lot of sense to me. Like, why wouldn't Palpatine just be the one to be doing all this stuff? Why does he need a clone that he can control like a puppet?
Because he wasn't fully
or
repowered yet,
if
maybe?
if he's able to clone hugely force powerful clones to go out and do his bidding, why doesn't he just make an army of those things to go out and conquer the galaxy? You know, there's a lot of little things where, like, if you stop for 2 minutes to actually think about in this movie, they're just awful. They're terrible. They don't make any sense. There's this whole subplot where Lando was trying to find his daughter who was kidnapped by the First Order.
Oh yeah.
And that ends up being Jada, who, you know, he meets at the end of the film, but because that subplot got cut out, it just comes off like him being like a creepy womanizing old man.
That was one of the creepiest moments. He's like, well, let's find out.
Yeah, like Jude was like, if it had just cut before he said that line, it would have been fine. But because he said that line, she's like, it made me feel like I'd just been molested.
He was totally hitting on her
Yeah.
in the context of the scene. But when you take into account the idea that like he's been searching for his daughter for years and years and years.
Yeah, but they don't tell you that in the movie.
No, they don't, because they don't have time, because he's constantly trying to play catch up, because The Last Jedi was just like,
it also goes towards Chris Terrio and J.J. Abrams making this the most convoluted movie.
yeah.
I mean, we got to talk about the relationship between Rey and Kylo before we end this thing, because there's so much.
Oh, the love
going on there.
relationship?
Well, just even the relationship, like Leia dying, trying to.
We're going to talk about Reylos. Vader, are you ready?
You guys can talk about this.
I mean, how is it that Kylo finally wins a fight with Rey and then she stabs him like with a cheap shot?
Well, because Leia had
Also, the
distracted.
Force healing. How does that break the universe in so many different ways?
the books, man.
half, man.
It's all about the books.
like why didn't Obi-Wan heal Qui-Gon as he was dying?
It's all about the books, man.
Like, I'm just going to go on record and say this right now. If it's not on his TV screen or on a movie screen,
It's not canon.
not canon in my
That's
head.
the MacGuffin.
It's never going to be.
Like movies have to stand on their own.
That's
like
right.
If you can't communicate what you need to communicate within a movie, then you're doing it wrong.
Comic books and books need to. God, I can't even think of the word.
They need to expand on what the
Yes,
story
they don't.
is
They need to
instead of
expand the story,
explaining
not
plot
explain
holes.
it. Yeah.
I agree with you. The only thing I can say against that is that the ancient Jedi texts
The ancient Jedi texts.
that Luke had on that tree that Rey took with her, that is the biggest plot convenience for all of these questions that you guys have. How did she learn about Force healing? Well, they were in the ancient Jedi texts. Like, she must have learned it from there.
Ancient Jedi texts.
And why didn't all the other Jedi from the past have
It's
these abilities?
It's not
Well,
about where she learned it from. It's about the fact that it exists to begin with. Because as a storyteller, when you put that in there, this is another thing that creates retroactive plot holes. Like, how did no other Jedi ever have this power before? Why didn't they use it?
The only thing that you can say about that is that
If they were in the ancient Jedi text, then you have to assume that all the Jedi that came before her knew it.
not necessarily, because this was the first Jedi temple, and Luke was in search of it. And this
You tell me that Jedi Masters had never migrated there and read those things?
It's an unfindable place. Nobody knew where it was until Luke found it.
Did Luke even read them?
He read them.
Apparently, he even wrote one of them.
Did he?
Well,
I kind of got the
journal
impression
was among those books.
I got the impression from Yoda that Luke didn't read them. Am I wrong?
Page turners, they are not.
No, he read them.
So Yoda had read them. Oh, fuck. God damn it, Kate is just right.
Get used to it. It happens a lot.
God damn it. All right, screw these movies.
So Kylo and Rey's relationship. So at the end, where Rey kills Palpatine, which is what Palpatine wanted to begin with, by the way. So technically, Palpatine wins. So Rey dies.
Palpatine's win this for franchise.
Rey dies, and then Kylo, who's never shown that he knows how to force heal before, uses the force to heal Rey. But if you watch that scene, he places his hand over her womb and uses the force to heal her as he transfers his force energy into her. Now, if you look at how Shmi Skywalker became impregnated with Anakin through the Immaculate Inception, chances are Kylo Ren impregnated Rey and brought her back to life and then died. So technically, the Skywalker line still exists because she's going to have a baby.
Shut the fuck up.
This is my theory. I think I just broke Alex.
Jesus Christ.
The Reylos were right.
I hate you so much.
Yeah.
I hate you
and that's why she kissed him.
Just shut up.
Because she wanted to thank him for impregnating her.
Thank you for
Well, it makes
impregnating me
more
with your
sense than
force
the
seed.
movie I watched because they have like no chemistry. I don't see them falling in
And
love at all.
Salty's done.
You know,
There was a tweet.
Can we just stop now? Read the commercial.
There was a tweet where somebody was like, I don't know about you guys, but I think Rey looks pregnant in this scene.
They're right. They're correct.
Right. They were fucking
God damn it.
The Reylos know best.
The Reylos win.
Dare you. I'm done. I have to quit now.
The Reylos won, sir.
I have to go start my own podcast. Buy all this shit and put it in my house.
You can have the shit that I used to use.
I don't want your shit. This stuff's way better. That's why we have this stuff now.
Okay.
But how about that scene between Rey and Ghost Luke, where basically Luke just gives the middle finger to Rian Johnson and
was
everything
great.
that he
A
set up.
Jedi's weapon deserves more respect
respect.
than this. Yeah, that was a total.
Yeah, and the
Ryan
whole
Johnson.
thing where she's like, "I'm doing what you did," and he's like, "I was wrong."
Everything. Yeah, I was wrong. Everything that we wanted Luke to do in the Last Jedi.
You better raise that TIE fighter or that X-Wing fighter out of the water, man.
Right.
That's what
You better do it right now.
And where did Kylo Ren get that TIE fighter to go to Exegol with?
Oh boy.
Also, the interesting thing is like, so the ships didn't know how to go up in Exegol because of the magnetic interference from the storms.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
But after Palpatine died, the atmosphere of Exegol completely changed. The storms went away. So it's like, could Palpatine have just stopped being evil long enough for the storms to clear up so his planet-killing fleet could leave?
Do all those people live underground?
No, I don't think they were underground.
Oh, that's the other thing too. Is like
Where were all these Sith people at?
the explanation, the official explanation for where he got these thousands upon thousands of people
followers
was because they were all born and raised on this planet by loyalists. That was the explanation. He basically created an entire planet of people who were in servitude. You haven't talked in a while, Danny. You want to say anything about this? Kadish broke me with the Reylo thing. I'm done.
I just, the more I think about it, sadly, the less I like these movies.
See, the minute you start thinking critically about these films, they just fall apart.
But I will take it back to my movie theater experience. I enjoyed the experience
Long enough.
Yeah, to all the people out there who love these movies, I don't want to take anything away from them.
Oh, I do.
But if these movies had been made right, they would probably love them even more.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think it's wrong to criticize bad art because you just get more bad art if you let it slide.
Oh, don't you know that nothing about art is objective, sir?
The Rise of Skywalker.
Listen, if you guys are listening to this podcast on YouTube and you are just like fever hatred towards Matthew Kadish for destroying your favorite movie, comment on this YouTube channel your paragraph about why this movie is good, and
I'll show you why you're wrong.
We'll be glad to talk to you about it.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I enjoyed watching The Rise of Skywalker. Like, it's a fun enough movie if you don't think about it too much. But when you start analyzing it from, you know, any logical point of view, it doesn't hold up.
No.
Like the whole Holdo maneuver thing, like, you know, we wondered how JJ was going to fix that. And, you know, he basically just said, we can't do it because it's a 1 in a million shot. And it's like, how lazy do you have to be to use that as your excuse?
Honestly, my opinion on that is he had bigger fish to fry.
The best part about that was that he put Dominic Monaghan in there
Yeah.
to say it.
The Hobbit.
Yeah.
What was his name? Mary? All right.
But I mean, there's just so much about this movie.
There's more.
Between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, you could literally talk about this like the problems with these two movies for weeks.
Oh, it's not the last time we'll ever talk about these. That's for sure.
God, I hope it is.
At least
until next May.
Until next May.
I'm just gonna put these on repeat.
Yeah.
We'll play.
Oh no, we're gonna overrule you.
We'll have more stuff to talk about by then.
Yikes! All right. So that's it for our.
Well, do we want to go around and rate the sequel trilogy from best to worst?
Why? Because I spent 3 hours shitting all over them.
We're gonna rate them.
Yeah, we're gonna rate them from best to worst.
1, 3, 2, or 7, 9, 8.
7, 9, 8.
Yeah. Okay.
7, 9, 8.
7, 9, 8.
7, 9, 8.
There's no other rating.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
there's not.
That is all that
The
can
only
be.
way to win is not to play.
And Ryan Johnson can lick my butthole,
You could toss your salad.
toss my salad.
Don't be a man baby.
Don't even get me started on the social media reactions. To this movie. All right, guys, thanks for listening. If you hated these movies, I'm sure you enjoyed this podcast. If you love these movies, you probably hated this podcast. But either way, go to saltynerdvideo.com and check out all of our Go to saltynerdvideo.com and like and subscribe, or dislike and subscribe, whatever. I don't care. Just go to saltynerdvideo.com and check out our YouTube channel. We have all these videos and all these podcasts split up into digestible segments, all for your convenience.
And if you want to subscribe to the podcast,
You can go to saltynerdpodcast.com. It'll take you to your respective Android and or Apple product to subscribe to the podcast, and you can listen to us there. Like, subscribe, give us a rating, talk shit in the comments. I don't really care. Just interact with us because we want to hear from you.
Hey, Salty.
Yes?
My skin's kind of dry.
You can go to organic. My wife might not. Yeah, I don't know if I want to.
that's my
do that.
line.
So what about one of those amazing shirts that eventually you're going to make that everyone can buy that's going to just make you all the money in the world? What is it again, Mr. Kadish?
What was it?
Oh,
I
God.
chalk it up to bad
Chalk it
writing.
up
we
to
go.
bad writing.
You can
That's
go to
gotta be a shirt.
saltynerdstore.com and
There
go to
we go.
our Teespring account. That'll take us there. We got a bunch of different
some
t-shirts
stuff.
there. I'm gonna revamp that because Vader's been nagging me to update the shopping
Yeah, you haven't
list.
done shit for
I
like
have not.
months.
I
There's
haven't.
nothing on there.
You
You
can
have
go
a
there.
day job, damn it.
I do. I did. I don't anymore.
Thank you, COVID.
Yeah, thanks.
I really don't want Ryan Johnson anywhere near my butthole. Okay. So, I don't know why I said that earlier.
He's going to subvert your expectations.
You know what I don't understand? So a lot of people, boycotted the Solo movie because of The Last Jedi, but a lot of people did not. Nobody. You didn't hear about people boycotting Knives Out because of Ryan Johnson. I just
Oh,
like,
well,
yes,
that's-
you
yes,
did.
you did.
did you?
yeah,
Were
for
there?
sure.
Oh,
That was a
my
thing?
God. That's,
Okay.
that's all I heard about for like
Oh, really?
3 months.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There were a lot of people who boycotted.
I know
Knives
people
Out.
They
who
did. Okay.
don't allow that to be played on their home television set.
Shout out to Roe over there in
Yeah,
Chicago. Yeah, he's like, that movie's not allowed to be played. in
And
the
his
house.
wife did it anyway.
I mean, I haven't seen
guy.
it just because I don't want
It was
Ryan Johnson. Yeah, like I don't want to support that man.
Is
in
it the
any way, shape, or
movie
form.
that killed it, or is it the social media? His specifically Ryan Johnson's social media reaction to the backlash.
No, for
What is
me,
it?
for
Yeah.
me, for me, no. Just
It was just the movie?
Just what he did to Luke Skywalker. Yeah. What he not even so much the movie. What he did to the character of Luke Skywalker. is unforgivable in my opinion. As someone who, like, I spent my entire life up until that moment thinking I knew who this character was, that, you know,
And this guy just
and he just, you know, took a big fat shit all over it. So, you know, like, no, yeah, screw that guy. I'm not watching.
You know, he
supporting
spent
him.
a time at the was it Disney? It was either the Disney convention or San Diego Comic-Con, but he was in there amongst the fans, like passing out pizzas all night, like people, like hanging out with people who were waiting in line. Like there's stories about Rian Johnson being like super awesome to fans.
I'm sure he's a cool guy. I'm sure, like, he probably is a really cool guy. I'm just saying that, like, I get to choose who I support with my money, and he's someone that has wronged me in such a way that I will never support him with my money. That's all. You know?
Okay.
So I'll pirate his shit if you want me to watch it. Sure, I'll download it illegally. There you go.
Rian Johnson is a guy who's got a little bit of talent and a whole lot of ego. And his entire career, he's been coddled by the critics. He's been told that he's brilliant, that he can do no wrong, that his poop don't stink. And the fact of the matter is that he's nowhere near as talented a filmmaker as he thinks he is. And he also doesn't respect the fans of established franchises. Now, when he's left to his own devices and he's doing his own thing, he's fine. I thought Knives Out was a perfectly, enjoyable little cozy mystery type thing. A little bit predictable, but it wasn't a bad movie by any means. I didn't think Looper was a bad movie. I didn't think Brothers Bloom was a bad movie. I didn't think Brick was all it was made out to be, but it certainly wasn't a bad film. The Last Jedi, however, was shockingly bad. Like, you could teach a screenwriting course of how not to write a screenplay based off of The Last Jedi alone, and I'm absolutely flabbergasted that not only did he write such a bad script, but that he continues to defend it. And if you just look at the interviews that he did around the time that was coming out, especially when he was paired up with Mark Hamill.
Oh, God, yeah.
And Mark tells the story about how he disagreed with Ryan's vision for this. And then he talks about how Ryan's response was like, we're not making a movie for these people. We're making the movie for us. We wanted to do the story we want to tell. And what Rian Johnson meant by that was him.
Yeah.
Rian Johnson, not us, not Mark Hamill and Rian Johnson.
Which is a stark difference to people who have been working on The Mandalorian.
The greatest filmmakers always keep their audience in mind. Like, I recently watched a interview with Hitchcock where he was interviewed by the press, and it was about like one of the movies that he'd made kind of towards the end of his career. But he was constantly talking about how he wanted his audience to think and feel when they were watching a movie. And that was the brilliance of Hitchcock, was that he was the ultimate psychiatrist. He understood the psychology behind how audiences, interact with stories. And so he was able to scare people and make people laugh and, thrill people because he understood the psychology of the audience. And it seems to me like so few filmmakers nowadays understand that. It seems to me like they're either so self-absorbed that they're only making movies for themselves, or they don't understand the audience at all. And so they're trying to force an audience to accept something that the audience isn't going to accept. And it's a failure on the part of Hollywood that there's no apprenticeship programs. There's no real kind of gauntlet that people have to go through to pay their dues in order to be considered a good storyteller anymore. It's all about who you know. It's all about how much money you can bring to the table. It's all about what kind of politics you have. And these people keep making crappy movies and keep destroying successful, beloved franchises, all because they haven't done the work to actually bother to learn how to tell a good story. And it's sad.
It is sad. It's all about the money. The root of all evil.
Yeah, like J.J. Abrams should be the next Spielberg, but he's not. He's the biggest hack in Hollywood. And I'm not afraid to say it. And it saddens me because I used to be a fan of his. But he's proven time and time again he doesn't understand story. He can't even end a movie. He doesn't know how to do an ending.
There needs to be a new Lucas come up, a new Spielberg, somebody new that can give us a new world to play in that we love and enjoy.
I think
something for a new generation of people.
I think Denis Villeneuve is the closest thing we have to a new Spielberg right now. Possibly Colin Trevorrow if he hadn't made so many bad dinosaur movies.
At least he respects the fans.
At least he respects the fans.
I tell you what, like, I can't wait to see Dune because Blade Runner 2049 was like one of the most beautiful pieces of art I've ever seen.
I really liked it.
Yeah, it's such a good movie.
I agree.
And Arrival. Have you ever seen Arrival?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Such a powerful movie.
All right, guys, we're going to end our Star Wars month. That's right. That's the end of it. We are no longer talking about Star Wars. May is done.
Just real quick, can I ask you guys?
God damn it, Kadish. I'm trying to do an outro.
I know
3 hours and 20 minutes.
this kind of goes hand in hand with the Disney trilogy. What do you guys think Taika Waititi is going to do with his Star Wars movie?
I think he'll be fine.
Yeah. I think he'll
He'll insert some humor,
oh, for sure.
but I think he'll be respectful to the property.
It really seems like the future of Star Wars is going to be on TV instead of the movies, which I think is a little bit,
it's sad. However, I think it might need to live there for a little while before it comes back.
How funny.
And you know what? If it takes this whole TV generation with Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni and Taika Waititi, if it takes this little short period of time, a couple of years, whatever it takes, for them to rebuild Star Wars fandom and the love of Star Wars on Disney Plus and on TV and on serialized episodes before they bring it back to the big screen in like a big grand epic tentpole movie, that's fine. As long as those 3 guys or 4 people are in charge of Star Wars, Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, the 2 main people who I think respect the fandom, respect the franchise, love George Lucas, those guys are going to bring this franchise back.
Unfortunately, you still have Kathleen Kennedy in the mix.
Yeah, we'll see.
I don't think there's anything wrong with the TV per se. You got to remember Star Trek got its its heyday was television,
And you can tell better stories on TV.
Yeah,
too.
yeah. You've got more time.
As long as they have Force users in Star Wars, I'll be okay with the right storytellers.
Yeah.
I don't like this idea of Star Wars stories without Jedi or Sith or something that's tapping into that.
It's what
Force
separates
stuff.
it from every other
Yeah.
sci-fi.
Yeah, exactly.